You won't believe what happened inside that crowded courtroom in downtown Los Angeles, where the fate of a high-profile jewelry heist case was about to be decided. The air was thick with tension. Reporters, lawyers, and families packed the benches, eyes fixed on the judge's bench, waiting for justice to unfold. But no one expected the trial to come to a halt because of a little girl, just 3 years old. Lisa, a 32-year-old single mother, sat quietly near the back, clutching her daughter Emma's tiny hand. Emma, clutching a bright red toy fire truck, a birthday gift just days old, was supposed to be invisible. No one wanted a child in this courtroom, especially a child this young. The courtroom staff had initially refused entry. Children were a distraction, a disruption in a place where order was sacred. But Lisa's voice trembled as she explained she had nowhere else to leave Emma, and with a solemn nod, the judge finally relented. On one condition: the child must remain quiet. Lisa's heart pounded as she settled Emma down beside her, eyes darting nervously to the doors and the sharp suits at the front. The tension wasn't just about the case, it was about the weight of her own fears. Could her daughter sit still long enough? Could she remain silent in this room filled with hardened criminals and serious accusations? Emma's fingers gripped the little fire truck, eyes wide but calm, watching the room like she understood more than anyone gave her credit for. At first, no one noticed Emma. She was just a child, a quiet shadow in the back row, fading into the sea of seriousness. But then, in a moment no one could have anticipated, Emma's finger shot out, pointing directly at a man standing near the prosecution table. Mark Reynolds, a seasoned detective with a reputation, a man with a limp and a cold stare. The entire room froze. Conversations died mid-sentence, pens stopped scratching paper, and even the judge's gavel seemed to pause mid-air. 2 words escaped Emma's lips. Soft, innocent, yet explosive. That one. Suddenly, the room was gripped by silence so heavy it felt suffocating. Mark's face tightened, but he said nothing. The judge called for order and abruptly suspended the trial. Everyone was left questioning. Why would a toddler single out this man? What secret did she unknowingly expose? Lisa's breath hitched. She whispered to Emma, urging her to stop, but the girl's gaze never wavered from the detective. Whispers rippled through the courtroom like wildfire. Was this a coincidence, or the unraveling of something far darker than anyone suspected? And just like that, a simple toy fire truck in the hands of a 3-year-old became the spark that threatened to ignite an entire system built on trust, a system now on the brink of collapse. What happened next would shock everyone and change lives forever. Emma was sitting quietly, clutching her little red fire truck, her wide eyes scanning the courtroom like she was trying to piece together the giant puzzle surrounding her. The trial had just begun, the heavy words echoing off the cold walls. Accusations, evidence, testimonies, all circling around Lisa's world now. But then, out of nowhere, Emma's small hand lifted, finger trembling just a bit before pointing straight at Detective Mark Reynolds. The entire courtroom froze. Conversations that had been flowing moments before stopped mid-sentence. Pens hovered over papers, and even the shuffling of feet seemed to vanish. Every eye swung to the man Emma had singled out. Mark Reynolds, 40 years old, known for his cold, calculating demeanor, a man with a limp that gave him a ghostly gait. He was a key figure in the investigation, but Emma's gesture brought a ripple of unease that no one could explain. Just 2 simple words slipped softly from Emma's lips. That one. It was a whisper barely audible, but it was enough to crack the tension like lightning striking the tallest tree in a silent forest. A hush fell, heavy and suffocating. The judge, eyes narrowing, immediately called for order, and in a move that stunned everyone, suspended the trial. The gavel came down, but instead of stamping authority, it echoed uncertainty. Why had a 3-year-old pointed at Reynolds? What secret did she unknowingly unearth? The question hung thick in the air, unanswered, but palpable. Mark's face tightened, jaw clenched, yet he said nothing. His cold stare swept across the room, resting briefly on Lisa and then flicking away like he wanted no part in this unfolding drama. The prosecution team exchanged nervous glances, their earlier confidence shaken. Defense attorneys leaned forward, sensing the fault lines widening beneath the courtroom's foundation. The spectators, many unaware of the full backstory, whispered in anxious speculation. Lisa's heart pounded so loudly she feared it might betray her. She whispered soothing words to Emma, desperate to calm her daughter, but Emma's gaze was locked, unyielding. "That one," she repeated quietly, like a mantra she couldn't let go. Lisa's mind raced. How could a toddler know? She had kept everything from Emma, shielded her from the darker truths. But here she was, unwittingly dragging them all into a spotlight, brighter than any courtroom light. The atmosphere shifted from tense anticipation to full-blown disruption. Phones were drawn discreetly, messages shot off. News of the child's declaration was spreading like wildfire beyond the courtroom's walls. The walls that had once promised justice now seemed to tremble under the weight of hidden truths clawing their way out. As the court emptied, the story didn't end. Behind closed doors, a team of internal investigators huddled around dusty files and screens glowing with data. Old cases were pulled back into the light, suspicious patterns re-examined, shadows in the system laid bare. The same man Emma pointed at, Mark Reynolds, was at the center of these tangled webs. The questions that no one dared ask aloud in the courtroom were now shouted in the quiet rooms of those determined to uncover the truth. What had Emma seen that no adult did? Why had her innocent finger become a beacon, illuminating secrets so dark they threatened to consume everything? And just like that, the trial that promised closure became the opening act in a saga far more explosive than anyone expected. You think corruption hides in the shadows, invisible to the naked eye? Think again. What the investigators uncovered was a dark web woven tightly within the very system sworn to protect justice. Over the last 6 years, 17 separate armed robbery cases, cases that should have been clear-cut, were tangled in a sinister cover-up. Nearly $5 million vanished, victims silenced, truths buried under piles of manipulated evidence. Detective Mark Reynolds wasn't just a figure on the periphery anymore. His presence was stamped on nearly every crime scene. The limp in his step, described by witnesses as a subtle but unmistakable signature, was the thread unraveling the entire scheme. But Reynolds didn't act alone. Deep inside the police force, accomplices masked their tracks using sophisticated technology. They doctored reports, erased surveillance footage, and twisted digital trails to fit their narrative. Money flowed through shadowy channels, crossing oceans from Los Angeles all the way to bank accounts in Singapore and Hong Kong. Offshore shell companies, fake invoices, and phantom transactions formed a labyrinth so complex it could have fooled the sharpest minds, except for the innocent gaze of a 3-year-old girl. This wasn't just a story of theft. It was betrayal at the highest level. Families destroyed, businesses shattered, innocent people locked behind bars for crimes they never committed. The victims who once faced cold justice were now summoned back, their voices finally heard in hushed, tense meetings. Each story was a heart-wrenching testament to lost years, stolen livelihoods, and the crushing weight of institutional failure. The community's trust, once steadfast and unwavering, had cracked. Anxiety seeped into every neighborhood, every coffee shop conversation. People questioned the system that was supposed to protect them. Fear mingled with anger, and a pervasive unease settled over the city. All the while, the world watched as the truth clawed its way out from beneath the lies, sparked by a toddler's pointed finger. The corruption was vast, the deception deep, but the light had been switched on. And now, no one could look away. What secrets would the investigators uncover next? How many more lives were caught in this twisted game? The answers were buried just beneath the surface, waiting for the next chapter to be written. You ever wonder how one small voice can shake the pillars of an entire system? Emma, a 3-year-old with nothing but innocence in her eyes and a red fire truck in her hands, became that voice. The girl who didn't understand courtrooms, law, or lies suddenly sparked a revolution nobody saw coming. A revolution named after her. Project Emma. After the scandal broke wide open, the system that once seemed unbreakable was forced to look in the mirror. The investigation process was overhauled from the ground up. No more closed doors, no more silent witnesses buried beneath layers of bureaucracy. The new rules were clear. Every officer at a crime scene must now wear body cameras, not just for accountability, but to bring transparency to places where shadows thrived. But it didn't stop there. Independent oversight committees, staffed with civilians unaffiliated with law enforcement, were formed to watch, to question, to protect the truth. And the tech came in. AI systems designed to analyze behavior patterns, sift through mountains of camera footage, and catch what human eyes might miss. It was justice, updated for a digital age. 3 cities, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Houston, became the proving grounds. The results were striking. Errors in case files dropped by 30%, and accurate evidence verification soared by 40%. Cases that once twisted in doubt now had clarity. People started to believe again. And all of this because of a toddler's pointed finger. Could a child really become the symbol of the most powerful reform in American justice history? Lisa, Emma's mother, found herself at the center of a new kind of spotlight, invited to speak at conferences, to tell their story, to inspire others who had lost hope to stand up and demand truth. The message spread fast, carried on social media, where Emma's courtroom moment went viral, amassing over 5 million views in just 3 days. But beneath the headlines and applause, questions lingered. How far would this revolution reach? Would it root out corruption? Or would old habits fight back? As Emma's story captured hearts across the nation, the very system she challenged faced its toughest test yet. What comes next will decide more than just a handful of cases. It will decide the future of justice itself. They were the unseen casualties, faces blurred by fear, voices barely a whisper in the storm of corruption that had gripped the city. People like Carlos, a small business owner whose life unraveled overnight. Wrongly convicted of a robbery he never committed, he lost his home, his savings, and almost his family. Behind closed doors, he shared his pain in a hushed voice, a mixture of anger and exhaustion. "I spent years fighting for a truth no one wanted to hear," he said, all because of lies wrapped in badges. Then there was Marissa, a single mother whose name had been dragged through the mud. The justice system labeled her guilty based on manipulated evidence. Her child taken away, her job gone. She lived in the shadow of a verdict she knew was false. Every day felt like drowning, she told us through tears. "I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting to be seen as a human again." Their stories are just fragments of a much larger tragedy, lives shattered by a betrayal so deep it cut through families, communities, and the very idea of justice. The emotional scars ran deeper than any sentence ever could, haunting dreams and stealing hope. These were people imprisoned not only by cold bars, but by a system that refused to admit its mistakes. In the midst of this darkness, a beacon appeared, an unexpected ally in the form of a determined human rights lawyer named Daniel Morales. Daniel wasn't just defending cases, he was fighting a war against a broken system. These people needed more than a lawyer. They needed a voice, he said, his eyes burning with resolve. He became the bridge between the forgotten and the fight for redemption, guiding them through the labyrinth of appeals, reopening investigations, and pushing for justice where none seemed possible. Thanks to the funds recovered from the corrupt network exposed by Emma's innocent act, a victim support fund was established. Over the last 2 years, it has helped more than 120 people reclaim their lives, providing legal aid, counseling, and financial assistance. It's more than money, it's a lifeline, a second chance. But the journey hasn't been easy for Lisa and Emma either. Amid the flood of media attention and public scrutiny, the mother and daughter faced whispers and sideways glances. Some questioned their motives, others doubted their courage. Yet, through it all, Lisa remained steadfast, drawing strength from Emma's pure heart and quiet bravery. "We didn't ask for this," Lisa confided, "but we knew silence would only let the darkness win." Their resilience inspired many, reminding us that behind every headline and viral moment are real people, with pain, hope, and dreams. As the stories of the victims unfold, the question lingers: How many more lives lie hidden in the shadows, waiting for the light? And just when it seemed the fight for truth was gaining ground, a new revelation emerged, one that threatened to upend everything once again. Sometimes I wonder if Emma truly understands the storm she set in motion. She's just a little girl, 4 years old now, still clutching her favorite fire truck as if it holds the power to save the world. And maybe, in its own quiet way, it does. This world we live in, it's changing, slowly but surely. Just like that memorial dedicated to those forgotten victims, standing tall now where silence once ruled. The air was heavy that day, with leaders, families, strangers all gathered to remember, to honor, and to promise that nothing like this will ever be swept under the rug again. But beneath the applause and speeches, there's a lingering truth. Change is never simple, never neat. The fight isn't over. Reforming a system that's been broken for decades takes more than laws and cameras. It demands vigilance. It demands courage from people like you and me, from those willing to keep their eyes open when others want to look away. Emma's small act was the spark, but it's the flame we all must nurture. There's a weight that settles deep inside me. Because this story, it's not just about justice served. It's about the cracks still running beneath the surface, about the wounds too raw to heal overnight, the voices unheard, the faces still waiting for their chance. And sometimes when the night grows quiet, I catch myself wondering, have we done enough? Have we spoken enough truth? Or are there still shadows too stubborn to fade? If you've ever felt silenced, unseen, or powerless, know this, you're not alone. Maybe Emma's story stirred something in you, a flicker of hope or a spark of anger. Maybe it reminded you of a truth you've held inside, too afraid or too weary to say aloud. If that's you, if this story touched you in ways words can't fully capture, I invite you to stay here with us. Like, comment, share, not because we demand it, but because sometimes that small act is the loudest voice you can lend. A quiet way to say, I see you, I believe in truth, I'm here. Because change isn't the work of one, it's the journey of many. And every hand raised, every story shared, every heart willing to listen, that's how we keep the flame alive. So, from me to you, thank you for being part of this story, for carrying its weight alongside us. And remember, even the smallest hand can make the biggest difference. Here's to Emma. Here's to truth. Here's to the dawn we're still chasing. If you believe justice can rise and hope can win, stay with us. Together, we're stronger. Together, we change the world.